Today we're going to take a look at an interesting WinISD plot of three speakers that really don't belong together on a plot, but we're going to do it because there's a comparison to be made here. So there is an ESB, it's an Italian brand, ESB 5000 series. I think it's a 5.165 woofer. It's out of a three-way set. And then we're also going to look at the stereo Integrity TM8, which is an 8-inch mid-bass. And then also a Dynaudio MW182, which is a 10-inch mid-bass. And the comparisons will be made directly on the WinISD program with SPL plots and anything else we can muster like an Xmax plot. And we're just going to see what they do in the enclosures that are provided for a sample that was posted to the DIY mobile audio community. So I'm curious to see what we're going to find. Let's build the MW182 by adding new. And I'll pull the specs here to get this out of the way. Gotta do a bit of a dance to get them on the same screen, but it will be okay. All right. The other way to do it would be just grab this information and then copy it over into like a notepad. So this is Dynaudio. I'm sitting away on my couch on my big screen here, so sometimes it's hard to see clearly these tiny little words. Yeah, the 182. Okay, so the 182 QES is 0.84. Let's zoom this in. Make life easier on my eyes. 0.84 QMS 2.8. Tab past QTS to let it auto-calculate. FS, that's going to be 40 equivalent volumes, 34 liters. Make sure your unit of measure matches. 36.5 grams. Tabbing, getting past RE because I can see the other specs for magnet strength are published at 6.4 TM, and you can see that fills in the ones above. And then LE, that's inductance at 0.5 millihenry, and it should be at 1,000 hertz here. If it's not published differently, like maybe at 10,000, then assume 1,000. Xmax, an important spec for these types of speakers. Looks like we'll have to go peak to peak at 9 millimeters. And that's linear excursion, that's Xmax, not XMEC. XMEC is 26 millimeters peak to peak. What we'll do is take this to half that. So that's only 4.5 millimeter. I say that because for as big a woofer as this is, and as expensive as it is, you would have expected more. I would have anyway. That's color commentary. And it's 180 watts, but cone area does rule. So verify everything's in place. Specs off the web, PDF, and then capture the PDF. That's just for me for notes for future, and save. Next up, we need the TM8. That's stereo Integrity TM8 right here. I already had it. I will show, yeah, it's ready to go. So I already had this loaded up, but that would be from the Stereo Integrity website. Same exact method. We're going to go, our first one's going to be closed, but infinite baffle. So we'll pick a response and ignore it, and we're just going to call it SI TM8 IB. All right. And then we're going to give it a box of 3x the VOS or more. So this is an approximation. So 31.7 liters equals like 1.12 cubic feet. So you can see out of the box that it wants massive airspace. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, the high Q of this means if you don't put it in infinite baffle, if you put it in anything but infinite baffle, you're going to have a peaky response. All right. And then we need to add in the ESB that was requested, and that's right here. It's the ESB 5.63K. 5.6K3, excuse me. New ESB as I was saying, ESB 5.6K3 mid-bass. Alrighty, so 0.5 QMS 4 auto calculate QTS with the tab. 71.3 hertz. That is very high. Right there I can tell that this is not a very good mid-bass at all. That is a mid-range. And probably a very good mid-range. Alright, MMS 12.1, very low. BL. Okay, see where it says 5.16, but it says NA. I'm just going to click this. I don't think it ever makes a difference, but there is no LE. No inductance. It's probably very low anyway. And then Xmax is 4.5 as well. Very low for a mid-bass, but high enough for a mid-range. And then PE is not published, so we are going to find it real quick. So ESB 5.6K3. Oh, that is for the full 3-way speed. I should have known that. So it's the 5.165 that we're actually tracking here. Nice woofer. Okay, we're going to fix this real quick. 5.6K3. All right. The specs probably match up, but it says it is normal power 160 watt. There we go. We got a number. Okay. All right. Now, importantly, this is a 6.5-inch woofer versus an 8-inch woofer versus a 10-inch woofer. So unfair comparisons, but nonetheless, this was part of the conversation. So let's talk about it. Let's call this like 30, since it would be infinite baffle only. That means vented to the atmosphere. And let's filter them out at, say, 70. Let's assume that it was a 4th order with the DSP. And Linkwitz wireless just to keep everything equal. All right. And then let's give it, this is a driver that is capable of 150 watts. Now it can do more, but let's keep it reasonable. And add signal until we get there. The red line is Xmax. And there's 150, so you can see I need to adjust. I was working on mid-ranges recently. Okay, so let's go and the cross at the high end. Now the low pass. Let's just call it 500. Good. All right, there's your stereo integrity. We'll just paint it red. Next, the Dynaudio MW182 in IB. Now, if it weren't in infinite baffle, it'd have to be in a very large box, so it's not practical. So we'll again, what did I call this at? 30? Yeah, just do that. And same filters. We'll just call it 70 for now. And then we'll bring this volume up and follow the excursion. 180 watts, so the coil can take more. Of course, the TM8 is underrated. But you can see as we are at 70 hertz 4th order, there's 150. It's capable of more. We'll call it 180. And Unsurprisingly, it has more efficiency due to more cone area, but not too much more. Well, actually, I can't say that because I parked the other one at 150, so it may be less efficient. And that's actually pretty stunning, given the fact that it's much larger speaker. So let's take this back to 150 and compare. Yeah, so it's only slightly more efficient here. It's almost a wash. Now this is only one aspect. I'm gonna guess the impedance is very similar. Yeah. All right, next, the ESB, the 5.165 series. Manually adjust here. ESB 5.165 IB. Now, as we know, the frequency resonance there was really high in the 70s, 71 or so. 71.3. That means it's not really a mid-bass driver in the same as these others. It's mid-woofer, mid-range. So when we give it a bit and then we add the crossover, we're probably going to need to be more aggressive with the crossover, or we can just keep our volume down. Let's paint these Italian green. So the next thing is to set the low pass. All right, now it rated itself at 160 watts, but why don't we see what the cone excursion itself can handle? All right, it's at 50 watts. And it's a 4.5 millimeter. We're at 4.3 millimeter at the top right, you can see. And yeah, about 90 watts ought to do it. Crossed over at 70. These guys are just about done in linear terms. Ah, but the efficiency wins, right? Right there. Now let's get the box right. So this isn't the correct box. We'll call it 30 because it's to space. And then what we'll also do is we'll make a copy of this, because in the current config, the gentleman has them in tiny, tiny enclosures. And I'm going to go into the thread and see if I can spot the size that was provided. No, I'm going to say no, but maybe we can then interpret. So if this enclosure here was this size, I would guesstimate that to be about 1/4 of a cubic foot, or maybe less. Yeah, I would get the tweeters up here. Badass car though, major props. Okay, so we got our copy, and what we're going to do is take this down to like 0.25. Now our QTC is still only 0.6. That means we can shrink it into 0.2. Let's make that yellow. All right, that's pretty definitive. These speakers actually do work well in tiny, tiny enclosures. No problem. It seems like it's going to be fine. It probably is just a matter of tuning that he's having an issue, except for the fact he may be expecting the lacking mid-bass from, a deeper driver, but here looks good. If that was not crossed as low, so for instance, if we drove this woofer at 80 instead of 70, again, this is all fourth order assumption with the DSP behind, then cone excursion is, I feel like I'm tracing the wrong woofer. So we'll make this one orange and this one stays yellow. Very good. So 0.2, and then this one stays 0.2, and then we take it filters are wrong. 80. Maybe 85. Yeah. Something like 85 ought to do it. It's just not a high excursion driver, that's all. I can take this back up. I see what I did. I jumped the wrong driver. 4 point. Let's look at the specs. We're going to need to remeasure our maximum. Cool. Okay, so in the tiny box 0.2 with a lot of power, not quite maximum. We're slightly over, so let's take this down to about 125. Yeah, there you go. That's an honest interpretation of the facts by model, which, you know, is itself not necessarily perfectly accurate. But you can see up to about 120 hertz, the small box design works actually more efficiently. And if you cross lower, you're good still, but your maximum SPL drops. It's still very, very high. That's an 109 decibel. That is not nothing. I was just about to wrap this video up and send it, and then a post came across stating the actual power available, which is a great deal. So we're going to play the game Smoke 'em if you got 'em. So in WinISD, so far I have limited myself by either Xmax or by the power rating by the manufacturer. So at this point, we've got a graph that shows our 165 or 6.5 inch woofers running into Xmax limits at about 90 watts on infinite baffle. And then in the tiny box at 90 watts, they are, let's look at it here. Yeah, they're still running into Xmax limitations. So the ESBs are tapped out even in smaller boxes. But if you set the crossover to, instead of say 70 to 85 fourth order, then you can get like to 120 watts and still keep them together, and they do have a higher power rating than that. But enter the TM8s, which are power hungry but also power capable. So let's take these up until we do run into either Xmax or 320 watts of power, and we can see, there you go, you still have room to spare. That peak occurs at 71 hertz ish, and we'll go into the SPL plot in just a minute, but I thought I'd take a look at the Dynaudio and try to push my luck there. Now I can tell it's getting kind of close. Now remember, the Dynaudio has an XMech mechanical limit really high. So we won't worry necessarily about breaking it from a suspension standpoint, but from a perspective of coil heat management, you might have a problem here. So let's just put it like at 225, and it's skirting that 4.5 inch, sorry, 4.5 inch, 4.5 millimeter limit. And that is going to produce this new plot. So in infinite baffle, we can see that the TM8 is at a significantly higher wattage, but within the maximums provided here, capable of reaching the same as the ESB. And I'm just going to get this plot. Whoop. Trying to hit the orange one. There you go. Right there at anything below 173 hertz, so upper mid bass to lower mid bass, then the TM8 is going to win. Now, in a moment here, it's probably worth looking. I have adjusted the crossover to arbitrarily 70 hertz fourth order. But if we were to take this to say 65, we're still good. And 60, not so good. But you could then just simply drop some of the power. So what I'm going to do is make a copy. And we'll keep that one red. And we'll make this one... I always struggle with WinISD because of the colors. It's like, how do you differentiate them closely? So here's our red one. And we'll take this to a filter of back to where we were at 70. And then we'll take this new one and we will set it at, let's go with 60, which is pretty bold. And we'll just drop the power until we don't get past X max. Let's call it 255-ish, 260. Right there. Okay, so what does it do on the plot? Yeah, see, if you choose to simply power them with less than maximum power, which you would just by moderation, you can see that if you choose to, you can cross the TM8 way down into lower mid-bass, upper subwoofer range. So that's an option for you. The Dynaudio, I'm going to bet because of the lack of excursion, you're probably going to be best at the 70 hertz range with, you know, lots of power, 220 some odd watts of power. So there you go. I hope that helps maybe for just a late entry review on what happens if you can put more power than you originally had planned. And, you know, my opinion on this is if you've got the TM8s and you want to poke holes in the car for IB purposes, this is a pretty good excuse to do so. Just take a look at all of the options you have here. So there we go. It was an interesting exchange of information on the plots because as the way I saw it, the ESB is actually very good in a tiny enclosure, which is the current configuration for that owner. But, you know, if you have a lot of power and you want more mid-bass than mid-range, looks like the TM8 or the MW182 would be a good choice for infinite baffle. That's not too unexpected, but it is nice to prove it out on a WinISD plot. Now, WinISD is not as accurate as reality, but it is a decent simulation within its constraints. So, you know, it is what it is. Feel free to post your comments below and we can talk about maybe what I did wrong. Like it if you enjoy this kind of thing. Not everybody does, but I sure do. Thanks for joining me on the Audio Foundry. Take care.